Mega! Shadows. He is stronger than steel and moves faster than a whirlwind. Sometimes he hides in mud, other times he transforms his shape like an ever-changing cloud. Although his fighting spirit burns like fire, his mind is as calm as still water. Violation of the commandments. Should Shinobi fail before completing the mission, he will disappear before the dawn and vanish forever. Keep this knowledge in your heart and mind. From the secret manual of Oboro Ninjutsu. Holy shit, now that's an intro! Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Shinobi 3 Return to the Ninja Master. That'll probably be the only time I call the game by its full title. Before we get into it, I am doing the same thing I've done in more or less every Shinobi game thus far, where I'm maxing out my shuriken total to start and changing my controls so that B is jump, because jump being in the middle just feels the most comfortable to me. With that said, let's just get right into the game, shall we? Moody. Alright, first new change right off the bat, if you double tap the dash button, you now actively have a running animation that moves about twice as quickly. On top of that, not only can you do a drop kick by pressing down on the attack button while in air, but if you press the attack button while dashing, you'll do a little bit of a jumping slash, though you do have some inertia upon landing, so make sure you don't do that when you're immediately next to a bottomless pit. Otherwise, you're eating a death, more or less. Otherwise, by and large, the game plays similarly enough to every prior Shinobi game. You have limited shurikens that kill most enemies in one shot, though if the enemy has more than 2 HP, they might not. Boxes are in every stage that sometimes contain health, sometimes contain points, sometimes contain more shurikens, sometimes contain bombs that detonate faster when you are closer to them, and you have various ninjutsu techniques. For instance, the one I have selected currently is Ikazuchi, which is temporary invincibility. But like some prior Shinobi games, we also have a blocking mechanic, where if you hold the attack button for long enough, you just block most projectile attacks. And if you're close enough to enemies, you just do a straight up melee attack, rather, which does a lot of damage. And that's really essential to taking out these mini-bosses very quickly. You can block more or less all the projectiles they throw out. You just need to watch out for the active sword swipes. Also, yeah, this game has mini-bosses, which is a first for the series, and kind of a last, because I don't think any of the future 2D games at least have that. You can now also cling onto and climb along ropes and ceilings as long as you press up when you're next to them immediately. With that said, you're going to want to master that mechanic especially fast, as you're going to be required to do that a lot in later stages. This game also has a wall jump. With that said, it's not a Metroid-like wall jump in that it's not Super Metroid or Zero Mission. It's closer to Metroid Fusion in that you have fixed momentum going off the wall, and in order to continue the wall jump and even to implement it, use it in the first place, rather, you need to press towards the wall and the jump button when you make contact with each wall. So you need to press right and jump if you're starting from the right wall, then left and jump, then right then jump again, and things of that nature. This game, complexity-wise, is easily the most complex 2D Shinobi game. With that said, it definitely comes with a difficulty curve, not only to learn the controls, but also because, I'll be frank, this game is just straight up hard. I would also argue this is probably the hardest Shinobi game. If it's not this one, it's either... No, actually, it's probably just Revenge of the Shinobi in running for the second hardest. Either way, boss 1 is this samurai guy. Every time you hit him, he dashes across the arena in the direction from which you hit him. With that said, that's always going to be towards you, as you can only hit this boss from behind. This is where you also should use your double jump that we still have since Revenge of the Shinobi to just get around him. I think if you let the boss attack otherwise, he'll throw some kunai at you himself, potentially swipe at you with either his spear or various swords. But compared to other bosses in the game, this boss is very easy to get into a state of pattern lock. Also, you may have noticed it thus far, but like prior Shinobi games, starting from, what was it that did that first? Revenge of the Shinobi, I think? You can tell a boss's relative HP based off their color. The more red they start to glow, the closer they are to dying. With that said, I do admit at this point I probably would have liked having a boss health bar on screen by this point in the series, as I'm seldom a fan of bosses not having visible HPs. If only for the fact of, okay, I keep messing up at this section, but I at least know I'm this far into the fight. If you keep dying early into a fight without knowing how little damage you've done, it hurts me at the soul level. With that said, by and large, level 1, there's a difficulty curve just due to how much you have at your grasp with this particular version of Joe Musashi. But it's also still the easiest stage in the game. It's all gonna be uphill from here. Also, this game's soundtrack is absolutely phenomenal. I believe this is another Yuzo Koshiro soundtrack, and it's probably their best work yet, honestly. Although there are quite a few times where you hear a sound effect and go, that was in Sonic 3. Mind you, it's like, I think they came out around the same time, because this one, I think, was 1993. When was Sonic 3 standalone released? 94? Yeah, that sounds about right. Either way, now we're on to level 2, and this is where one thing becomes very apparent. Shinobi 3 is not afraid to have set pieces. For instance, now we're riding a horse, and the horse does control a little bit differently. It's by and large an auto-scroller, though you can still do a jump kick with a horse, which is humorous. You control where you are to the left and the right of the screen, but your main goal here is to just take out the enemies or avoid them, period. There are going to be fences that you need to jump over in certain cases, as well as power-ups hidden in the sky like those kunai I just grabbed, or shuriken, in the game's terms. But by and large, your goal here is to just avoid attacks. In fact, I would recommend doing that and just grabbing anything along the way and not using your shurikens here in particular. Because the jump kick in this game is really good for avoiding using your shuriken count in the long run. As the mini-boss we're going to have to fight for this stage is, annoying, to say the least. Thankfully, the game does warn you whenever you're coming up on a hazard that could damage you, like a fence or in a certain other stage, even a rock. Because other games would not have warned you, and that's just a dick move. They also place health at certain places. It's one thing I like about this game. It's hard, but it's a fair hard. There's very little bullshit in this game that's just there to be a dick move. Only maybe 1 or 2 instances of it. Either way, mini-boss at this stage is technically a refight. I think this is the boss of the 2nd or 3rd stage, Revenge of the Shinobi, like the Shadow Ninja, I think. This guy walks left and right across the screen, or rather, he jumps to the left, dropping spears, which will then move left into you because momentum after they hit the ground, and then he'll jump right while doing a jump kick. This boss has more health than most would initially appear to have for mini-bosses, as its health bar is technically its shadow clones behind it, which always feels a little bit weird to have as a health bar. This is an environment shift. But yeah, my long-term advice for you, remember to not only use your close-range attacks, because not only are they a little stronger, but it keeps your shuriken total up. Don't be afraid to dash and do the jump kick a lot, as it can break through enemy shields. It does lower damage, yes, but it keeps you out of danger longer in certain cases. Like, you could use it to, say, this enemy right here shoots. I could use it to move over the bullet while also taking out the enemy, or taking out the enemy in front of it while also avoiding the bullet. With that said, now we're in an elevator section. This is where, if you haven't learned that you can climb onto things, you're going to want to, because there's going to be portions in this elevator sections where the platform is too high for you to jump up to even with a double jump, so you need to climb on bars that are in the foreground, like they're ropes in the first stage. With that said, let's go over the plot of the game as it's found in the manual, because that intro was not plot, that was just cool statements for coolness. Warrior of the Shadows. Joe Musashi, codenamed Shinobi, of the Oboro School of Ninjutsu has long been in a struggle against the forces of evil. Years ago, the nemesis of the Oboro School, the Neo-Z organization, was defeated by Shinobi. Its leaders killed or put in prison, and its criminal activity stopped cold. Joe Musashi decides to return to Japan and recuperate after the battle in Neo City. But while he is training in the mountains of Japan working to improve his already formidable ninja techniques, the Neo-Z leaders are secretly rebuilding their organization. Shinobi senses the evil powers growing and starts to make his way back to fight this new danger. Neo-Z's minions have been ordered to stop Shinobi at all costs. The rewards they've been promised, riches and power. The punishment for failure, slow, agonizing torture, and death at the fangs and claws of Neo-Z's war demons. What the hell? The stakes are the highest yet, and as Joe Musashi, Shinobi, you know that, unless you succeed, the world will fall into the clutches of Neo-Z. You must not fail. I find it interesting they mentioned Neo City there. That means that the Game Gear games are canon to the timeline? Which means there's a timeline? I mean, yeah, there was always kind of the implications of one, but never like that blatantly. Holy shit. Okay. I think the thing control-wise that always throws me off guard with coming back to this game, though, is I often forget there's a wall jump, because unless it's needed, it's never needed, so to speak. You never need to use it for anything outside of the needed cases. Even most bonuses, there are other ways to get. Either way, boss of stage 2 is the security robot. It can become a giant spark ball trying to shoot you with a giant laser, shoot pellets out to do that, or do this. What this is doing isn't immediately obvious, but it reverses my control, so now left moves me right and right moves me left. Thankfully, your attack buttons all remain the same. Also, it's myth seen that I should make a statement. Basically, every video in this game is probably going to be some amount of seizure warning, because this game tries to do some impressive effects for the Genesis, forgetting the fact the Genesis was not good at doing certain effects. That boss can be surprising, especially due to the sudden change of controls. But by and large, it's probably the easiest boss in the game besides the first stage's boss because of how little health it actively has. With that, though, we're on to what might be my least favorite stage in the game, Stage 3. Why is it my least favorite? We'll go over this as we go. The important thing to note is that we have flying enemies here, and even though I generally recommend saving your shuriken, just throw your shuriken at them. Because as long as you hit them on the first shot, it saves you a lot of potential annoyance, as they are very fast-moving if you let them live too long. Also, I should note, like many prior Shinobi games that have the power-up feature, if you get the power-up and get hit, you no longer have the power-up, so your damage is lowered. With that said, you can get so much damage done super quickly in this game that you don't need to worry about that too much. Although I actively forget one thing about the game. I'm gonna boot it up in a moment just to remember if this is true or not. I think this game brings back total touch damage, in that compared to Shadow Dancer on Genesis, only active attacks could damage you. But I'm thinking I might also be wrong on that. It might just depend on the enemy variety. Like these enemies here whose entire attack is touch damage might, but say the soldiers or the ninjas in certain stages, they might have to actively attack you to do any and all damage. Hold up. Let me boot up the game real quick.
Alright, potentially audible jump cut there. I tested it out. Looks like it is enemy dependent. Soldier, most humanoid types are not touch damage like they were in Shadow Dancer on Genesis, but certain enemy types like these little guys are actively hitboxes, so it is enemy dependent. Okay, good to know. Either way, I'm honestly still shocked that this game and Shadow Dancer on Genesis went for that angle, because that's so oddly ahead of its time in certain regards. Not many games opted for that angle that weren't RPGs. Like, even nowadays, one of the first games I can think of in more recent history that made it so that enemies had to actively be attacking in order to damage you was Freedom Planet. Also, it might be stating the obvious here, but don't touch the green goo on the bottom of the screen. I forget if it's instant kill. It might just be like, hey, you got hit. But either way, it's glowing neon green for a reason. It's bad. In general, most of the boxes in the game are pretty kind about being power-ups when you might need them. The only thing is, in the case you see a cluster of them together, I'd still recommend opening at least the first one with a shuriken from afar, as usually that's going to be the one that's a bomb in certain cases. Also, since we're coming up on the first use of some of them anyway, I should probably talk about the ninjutsu a bit more. The ninjutsu in this game works like it did in the prior games. You only get one per stage unless you find a power-up like the one I just picked up that increases the amount you have. Although I forget if dying gives you another one. I honestly forget. I don't know, before I go back to that. Mini-boss for this stage, a bunch of these enemies in a row. Threatening. My advice, stick here to the left and either do drop kicks or just throw shurikens. They run out eventually. Either way, here we are. You have the exact same 4 ninjutsu in this game that you do in Revenge of the Shinobi and some of the other games. You got Ikazuchi, which is the one we have currently equipped, which is temporary invincibility. You got Karyu, which is a screen nuke. You got Fushin, which makes you move faster and increases your jump height. And then you got Mijin, which works exactly like it did in Revenge of the Shinobi. You lose a life for using it, but it's a screen nuke that does a lot of damage. And it also makes you lose a life, but it restores your health bar entirely, so you can use it as a refill in case you need to. Either way, I think the mechanic here is pretty obvious. These antlion enemies grab onto you and try to make it so that you're still long enough for this reticle to lock onto us, so the boss fight in the background, to be blunt, can hit you with a laser attack. With that said, you do slowly sink into the ground here. I forget if it ever kills you if you're in it long enough. But it's definitely dangerous enough that this section requires you to rush. Especially considering the actual boss fight is right now against that very creature. Now, it took me a while to figure out the deal with this thing, and even then, during this playthrough, I think I messed it up a little bit. The way this boss works is whenever you hit him, which is in the face, he reaches his hand across the screen to try and grab you. It can damage you either on the way to or the way from. And that takes some getting used to, because it's probably the first boss, especially in the series, the way I played it, that has an outright reaction to getting damaged. Its main attacks are to fire a laser out of its mouth, which you have a better chance of dodging if you stand still and just hold duck. It can try and rise from beneath you. I think it can puke out some other projectiles. Yeah, it can like try and suck you in and then do another laser attack, I think. And it can fire some goo out of its head. Purely for the fact it has a reaction for getting damaged, this can be one of the longer boss fights in the game because that's prolonged in its ability frames. But even then, the fact it has a reaction at all makes this fight take some getting used to. The fact it does so much damage does not help. With that said, as long as you take your time, which I know has kind of been my entire recommendation the entire series, thus far at least, it shouldn't be too bad. Just watch your health, because it's very easy to lose lives in this game. It's very easy to take a lot of damage. With that said, this game does thankfully do a thing where I think you get points every certain amount of lives, every certain amount of points, rather, and you can hold more than what the maximum seems like it would be. In fact, you might notice up there in the top left corner with where my live count is, it's ninja equals 3. If you get more than 9 lives, the equals becomes a greater than sign, so you just know you have more than 9. Either way, with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, more stages. See you guys then.